The small Italian restaurant nestled on a quiet street corner had been there for almost 30 years. Wooden tables with checkered cloths, soft lighting from vintage fixtures, and the scent of garlic and fresh bread created an atmosphere that kept locals coming back. In the far corner of the dining room sat an old grand piano, its mahogany surface dulled with age and scattered with framed photographs of the owner's family. No one had played it properly in years. It was a busy Friday evening when Thomas Walsh pushed through the door, followed by 3 business associates. Thomas wasn't from around here. His tailored suit, designer watch, and the way he surveyed the room with slight disapproval made that obvious. He was visiting from New York to close a property development deal that would likely change this neighborhood forever. "Table for 4, he announced to the hostess, not bothering with pleasantries, somewhere quiet, away from the kitchen noise. The hostess, an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair pinned neatly back, smiled anyway. "Of course, sir. Right this way." She led them to a corner table not far from the old piano. Thomas sat with his back straight, barely glancing at the menu before setting it down. His companions, 2 men and a woman all dressed in similar business attire, seemed slightly more relaxed but followed his lead. They were clearly taking cues from him. "The wine list is limited," Thomas commented, flipping through the small leather-bound menu with a frown. "I suppose the house red will have to do." When their waitress approached, she didn't match Thomas's expectations either. She wasn't the polished server he was accustomed to in high-end New York restaurants. Instead, she was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her black pants and white button-up shirt were clean but obviously well-worn. A small name tag read Eliza. "Good evening," she said with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome to Antonio's. Can I start you with some drinks?" Thomas ordered without looking up. "House red for the table. Bring the bottle." "Certainly," Eliza replied, unfazed by his curtness. "And would you like to hear about our specials tonight?" Before Thomas could decline, one of his associates, the woman, nodded. "Yes, please." Eliza described the chef's specials with such detail and enthusiasm that even Thomas found himself listening. There was something in her voice, a quiet confidence despite her humble position, that caught his attention, though. "Eggplant parmesan is my personal favorite," she finished with a small smile. "We'll need a few minutes," Thomas said, cutting the moment short. As Eliza walked away to get their wine, Thomas turned to his associates. "Let's get the business discussion out of the way before the food arrives. The neighborhood zoning commission is proving more difficult than anticipated." His voice trailed off as piped-in music began playing from hidden speakers. A generic piano playlist that was just loud enough to be distracting. "Is that really necessary?" Thomas muttered, glancing around with annoyance. When Eliza returned with their wine and began pouring, Thomas made a dismissive gesture toward the ceiling. "The music, can you turn it down or off? We're trying to have an important conversation." "I'm sorry about that, sir. I can ask my manager to adjust it," Eliza replied. "Don't bother the manager," Thomas said with a wave of his hand. He glanced at the piano in the corner and a thought struck him. His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That piano, is it just for show or does it actually work?" Eliza followed his gaze to the old grand piano. "It works. The owner's father used to play every weekend, but that was years ago. It gets tuned twice a year out of tradition." Thomas's associates exchanged glances, sensing what was coming. "Then here's a thought," Thomas said, leaning back in his chair. "Since you can't turn off that terrible recorded music, why don't you play something for us instead? Something quiet in the background." He gestured toward the piano with his wine glass. Eliza's smile faltered for the first time. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm your server, not a pianist." "Come now," Thomas pressed, enjoying the discomfort he was creating. "Surely you can play something. Even chopsticks would be better than this elevator music." One of his male associates cleared his throat. "Thomas, I'm sure the young lady is busy with other tables." "Nonsense, Rob. Look around. The place isn't that full." Thomas fixed his gaze on Eliza. "Consider it part of the service. We're spending good money here." The restaurant had grown quieter. Nearby diners were glancing over, some with disapproval at Thomas's behavior. The hostess had noticed too and was moving toward them with concern on her face. Eliza stood perfectly still, her serving tray held against her chest like a shield. For a moment something flashed in her eyes, not anger, but something deeper and more complex. I haven't played in a very long time, she said quietly. Thomas, mistaking her response for acquiescence, smiled triumphantly. Well, there you go. It'll be entertaining at the very least. Probably better than whatever they're paying you to carry plates. The hostess had reached their table. Is everything all right here? She asked, placing a protective hand on Eliza's shoulder. Before the older woman could intervene further, Eliza gently placed her hand over the hostess's. It's okay, Rose, she said with a strange calmness. I'll play something. Rose's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You'll play? Eliza nodded. Just one piece. Rose searched the younger woman's face, then nodded slowly. I'll watch your tables for a few minutes. As Eliza placed her serving tray on a nearby empty table and removed her apron, Thomas turned to his associates with a smirk. See? Customer service isn't completely dead. But Rob wasn't smiling. That was unnecessary, Thomas. Thomas shrugged, taking a sip of his wine. She could have said no. Besides, how bad could it be? Might add some local color to our dinner. The other diners watched curiously as Eliza approached the piano. An older couple whispered to each other. A family with 2 teenagers paused their meal. Even the kitchen staff peered through the pass-through window. Eliza stood beside the piano for a long moment, looking at it as if it were both a long-lost friend and a dangerous adversary. She brushed her fingers lightly over the aged wood, then carefully moved the framed photographs to a nearby shelf. Slowly, she pulled out the bench and sat down. The restaurant had grown so quiet that the sound of the bench legs scraping across the floor seemed unusually loud. She adjusted her position, straightened her back, and gently raised the fallboard that covered the keys. The white and black keys gleamed in the soft restaurant lighting. Eliza stared at them, her hands hovering just above, not quite touching. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. From his table, Thomas watched with growing impatience. This should be good, he muttered to his associates, his voice carrying in the quiet room. Eliza's hands finally descended to the keyboard. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, the opening of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The gentle, flowing melody seemed to hang in the air like morning mist. Within seconds, it became clear to everyone in the restaurant that this was no amateur performance. Eliza's fingers moved with practiced precision, her body swaying slightly as the music built. Her eyes were now open but unfocused, looking at something no one else could see. As the piece progressed, her initial tentativeness vanished. The music grew stronger, more confident, filling the restaurant with sound that seemed impossible from the old instrument. At Thomas's table, the smirk had fallen from his face. His wineglass remained suspended halfway to his mouth, forgotten. His associates weren't looking at him anymore. All eyes were on the young waitress whose hands were creating magic. Throughout the restaurant, conversations had ceased entirely. A waiter stood motionless, plates balanced on his arm, unwilling to disrupt the moment with movement or noise. In the kitchen doorway, the chef had emerged, wiping his hands on his apron, his expression one of disbelief. The piece reached its climactic middle section, and Eliza's playing became more impassioned. Her technical skill was undeniable, but it was the emotion she conveyed that held everyone spellbound. This wasn't just someone who had learned to play. This was someone who spoke through the piano, who understood the music on a fundamental level. As the final delicate notes faded away, Eliza's hands remained poised above the keys for a moment before slowly returning to her lap. She sat motionless as if waking from a dream. The silence that followed was profound. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, and suddenly the small restaurant erupted in applause. Some diners stood. The chef was nodding vigorously, a broad smile on his face. At Thomas's table, Rob was the first to applaud, followed quickly by the other 2 associates. Thomas himself seemed frozen, his expression unreadable. Eliza turned on the bench, a flush spreading across her cheeks. She gave a small, almost embarrassed nod of acknowledgement before standing and smoothing down her server's uniform. As she walked back toward Thomas's table, the other diners watched, some even reaching out to touch her arm or shoulder as she passed. Rose, the hostess, was wiping tears from her eyes. Eliza stopped at Thomas's table and picked up her serving tray. I hope that was satisfactory, she said quietly. Are you ready to order now, or would you like more time with the menu? Thomas stared at her, seeing her truly for the first time. The arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by something that looked almost. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eliza smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Just your waitress for tonight," she replied. "Now, about that eggplant parmesan I mentioned." The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Eliza. After her unexpected performance, something had shifted in the restaurant's atmosphere. Customers who had never noticed her before now smiled warmly as she passed their tables. Several left unusually generous tips with notes of appreciation. The chef even prepared a special dessert just for her, which she had to politely decline because she was still working. Thomas and his business associates ordered their meals in a subdued manner, the earlier arrogance completely gone from his demeanor. Throughout their dinner, Eliza caught him watching her with a puzzled expression, as if trying to solve a complex equation. As the night wound down and the restaurant began to empty, Rose approached Eliza while she was clearing a table. "You never told me you could play like that," Rose said quietly, helping to stack plates. "In all the 2 years you've worked here, not once did you mention it." Eliza shrugged, not meeting the older woman's eyes. "It never came up," Rose laughed softly. "Never came up? Honey, people with that kind of talent usually can't stop talking about it." She paused, studying Eliza's face. "Antonio wants to speak with you before you leave tonight." Eliza's hands stilled on the water glasses she was collecting. Antonio Ricci was the owner of the restaurant, a man she had seen only a handful of times during her employment. He typically stayed in the back office handling the business side of things. "Did I do something wrong?" Eliza asked. "Wrong?" Rose shook her head in disbelief. "Quite the opposite. Now finish up here and don't keep him waiting." As Eliza continued her closing duties, she noticed Thomas's table was still occupied, though his associates had left. He sat alone, nursing what appeared to be a glass of whiskey, occasionally glancing in her direction. She deliberately avoided his section, letting another server handle his table. Just before midnight, with most of the staff gone and the restaurant quiet, except for the distant sounds of the dishwasher in the kitchen, Eliza knocked on the office door at the back of the building. "Come in," called a deep voice with a hint of an Italian accent. Antonio Ricci was a stocky man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair and the weathered hands of someone who had spent decades in kitchens before moving to management. He looked up from his desk as Eliza entered, his expression unreadable. "Sit, please," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Eliza sat, hands folded in her lap, unsure what to expect. 2 years, Antonio said, leaning back in his chair. 2 years you've worked in my restaurant, and I had no idea we had a concert pianist serving spaghetti and taking drink orders. I'm not, Eliza began, but Antonio held up a hand. Rose told me that after you played, Mrs. Abernathy at table 7 said you reminded her of someone she'd seen at Carnegie Hall last year, and Mr. Chen, the music teacher who comes in every Thursday, he couldn't stop talking about your technique. Antonio leaned forward, elbows on his desk. So who are you really, Eliza Reynolds? The question hung in the air between them. Eliza looked down at her hands. Server's hands now, with a small burn scar on one knuckle from a hot plate, nails kept short and practical. But they had once been different. I studied at Juilliard, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Piano performance. I was on scholarship. Antonio's eyebrows rose, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I was in my 2nd year when my mom got sick. Cancer. Eliza swallowed hard. Dad had been gone for years, so it was just me and my younger brother and sister at home with her. I took a leave of absence to care for them all. The doctors said 6 months, maybe a year. She looked up at Antonio, her eyes dry but pained. She lasted 8 months. By then, I'd lost my scholarship and had a 16-year-old brother and 14-year-old sister to raise. I'm sorry, Antonio said quietly. Eliza shrugged. Life happens. I came back here because housing was cheaper than New York. Got my siblings through high school. My brother's in college now on a baseball scholarship, and my sister's finishing her senior year. And the piano? I sold mine to pay medical bills. Haven't really played in almost 2 years. She gave a small, sad smile. Tonight was unexpected. Antonio nodded slowly, processing her story. That piano you played tonight, it was my father's. He brought it with us when we immigrated from Italy in the 60s. Refused to leave it behind. Cost more to ship it than everything else we owned combined. He stood up and walked to a framed photo on the wall. a younger version of himself standing beside a slender man with the same eyes. Both wearing chef's aprons, both smiling widely in front of a much newer-looking version of the restaurant. My father played every weekend for 30 years. Not like you, he was self-taught, played by ear. But the customers loved it. After he died, I couldn't bear to get rid of the piano, but no one played it anymore. Just sat there gathering dust. He turned to face Eliza. Until tonight. Something in his expression made Eliza sit up straighter. I have a proposal for you, Antonio said. Play for the restaurant on Friday and Saturday nights.
2 hours each night.
I'll pay you double what you make as a server for those hours. Eliza's breath caught. Mr. Ricci, and keep your regular shifts if you want them, he continued. Or cut back whatever works for you. But that talent of yours shouldn't be wasted carrying plates. Before Eliza could respond, there was a knock at the office door. Rose poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but that businessman from earlier is still here. Says he won't leave until he speaks with Eliza. Rose rolled her eyes. Told him we're closed, but he's persistent. Antonio looked at Eliza questioningly. The one who asked me to play, she explained. Thomas Walsh, Antonio frowned. You want me to send him away? Eliza thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, it's fine. I'll talk to him before I go. After finishing her conversation with Antonio and accepting his offer to play on weekends, Eliza found Thomas waiting by the bar area. The restaurant was empty now, chairs upturned on tables, floors freshly mopped. Thomas stood when he saw her approach. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, making him look slightly less imposing than earlier. Your boss said I could wait for you, he said, his tone much different from their earlier interaction, almost hesitant. What can I do for you, Mr. Walsh? Eliza asked coolly, maintaining a professional distance. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. I owe you an apology. My behavior earlier was inexcusable. I was rude and condescending. Yes, you were, Eliza agreed, not making it easier for him. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. I've been sitting here trying to understand why someone with your level of talent is waiting tables in a place like this. He immediately winced. That came out wrong again. I'm not very good at this. Not good at what? Admitting I've misjudged a situation. He sighed. Look, I develop properties for a living. High-end retail, luxury apartments. I look at this neighborhood and see potential profit margins. I look at people and categorize them the same way. Assets or obstacles. He gestured vaguely toward the piano. But then you played and suddenly everything I thought I knew about you, about this place, just collapsed. Eliza remained silent. Studying him. I have connections in the music world, Thomas continued. Friends on the boards of symphonies, music schools, recording studios. One call from me. Stop, Eliza said firmly. I don't need your help, Mr. Walsh. I don't need you to rescue me from my life. Thomas looked taken aback. I wasn't suggesting you were. You still think you know what's best for me based on 5 minutes of hearing me play? She shook her head. You don't know my story, my circumstances, or my choices. Then tell me, he said, surprising her. Please, I'd like to understand. Something in his sincerity made Eliza pause. After a moment's hesitation, she pulled out a chair at the nearest clean table and sat down. After a brief pause, Thomas took the seat across from her. I was at Juilliard, she began, telling him the same story she'd shared with Antonio earlier, but with more details. She told him about the late nights by her mother's hospital bed, practicing finger exercises silently on the edge of the mattress while her mom slept, about teaching her siblings to cook and helping with homework between hospital visits, about the day she'd watched her prized piano being wheeled out of their home to cover the mounting medical bills. After Mom died, I became their guardian, she continued. My brother is in his 2nd year of college now. My sister graduates high school this year. She's applying to colleges looking at scholarships. And you put your life on hold for them, Thomas said quietly. Eliza shook her head. This is my life, Mr. Walsh. It wasn't the one I planned, but it's mine. I made my choices and I stand by them. But your music will still be there when I'm ready to return to it. She smiled slightly. Actually, Mr. Ricci just offered me a weekend position playing here at the restaurant. Thomas nodded slowly. He recognized talent when he heard it. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I meant what I said about having connections. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, call me. Eliza looked at the card but didn't take it. No strings attached, Thomas added. No expectations, just an open door if you ever want to walk through it. After a moment's consideration, Eliza took the card and slipped it into her pocket. I should go. It's late and I have an early class tomorrow. Class? Thomas asked, surprised. Community college, part-time, business administration. She stood up. I told you, Mr. Walsh, I have a life. It's just different from what you imagined. As they walked to the door, Thomas asked, Will you be playing this weekend? Saturday night, Eliza replied. Mr. Ricci needs to get the piano tuned first. Thomas nodded. Maybe I'll stop by before I head back to New York. At the door, he turned to her once more. Thank you. Not for playing, though that was extraordinary, but for this conversation. For setting me straight. Eliza smiled, a genuine smile that lightened her whole face. Good night, Mr. Walsh. As she walked to the bus stop in the cool night air, Eliza's fingers moved unconsciously at her sides, playing invisible keys, muscle memory awakening after a long dormancy. For the first time in years, she felt a familiar stirring inside, the music that had always been there, waiting patiently for her return. Saturday evening arrived with a buzz of anticipation at Antonio's. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood about the waitress with the extraordinary piano skills. The usual crowd had been joined by curious newcomers, and by 7 o'clock, there wasn't an empty table in sight. Antonio had hired extra staff for the night and moved the piano to a more central location where everyone could see the performer. In the small employee bathroom at the back of the restaurant, Eliza stared at her reflection. She had splurged on a simple black dress, nothing fancy but more appropriate for a pianist than her server's uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun rather than her usual practical ponytail. A touch of lipstick completed the transformation. You look like a different person, Rose said, poking her head into the bathroom. A nervous, different person. You okay? Eliza nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. Just been a while since I performed for an actual audience. I wasn't expecting. All those people out there, Rose squeezed her shoulder. They're just folks who appreciate good music, honey. And after hearing you play the other night, I know they won't be disappointed. She checked her watch. 5 minutes. Antonio's about to make the announcement. Left alone again, Eliza closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. She flexed her fingers, which were stiff from her morning shift. For the past 2 days, she had been practicing whenever possible, staying late after her classes at the community college to use their practice rooms, working through scales and exercises to wake up the muscle memory that had lain dormant for too long. The piano itself had been transformed as well. Antonio had called in a professional tuner on short notice, paying extra for the rush service. The old instrument's soundboard had been cleaned, its action adjusted, the keys regulated. When Eliza had tested it that afternoon, she'd been amazed by the difference. The dusty relic had become a worthy instrument again, waiting for a skilled touch to bring it fully back to life. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It's time, Antonio called. Walking through the packed restaurant felt like moving through a dream. Conversations quieted as she passed, and she felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her progress to the piano. Antonio stood beside it, microphone in hand, beaming with pride as if she were his own daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his accent more pronounced than usual. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you our very own Eliza Reynolds, who will be performing for us tonight. The applause was enthusiastic, with several people who had been present for her impromptu performance days earlier, explaining excitedly to their companions what they were about to hear. As Eliza took her seat at the piano, adjusting the bench to her height, her eyes scanned the crowd. She spotted several regular customers, some of her fellow servers standing near the kitchen, and her heart skipped slightly. Thomas Walsh, seated alone at a small table near the back. He nodded almost imperceptibly when their eyes met. Eliza took a final deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. She started with Debussy again, the piece that had broken her silence, but moved on to a program she had carefully selected over the past 2 days. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major followed, its gentle, flowing melody filling the restaurant with warmth. She transitioned to more accessible pieces, a George Gershwin arrangement that had toes tapping, a Billy Joel song that several diners hummed along to. Each piece was met with increasingly enthusiastic applause. As she played, something remarkable happened. The nervousness that had gripped her backstage melted away completely. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: the joy of making music, of communicating emotions too complex for words through the simple act of pressing keys in a particular order. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with growing confidence, muscle memory returning fully after its long hibernation. Midway through the performance, during a brief pause between pieces, a young girl about 9 years old approached the piano shyly, clutching a piece of paper. "My mom says you take requests," she said, holding out the paper. "Can you play this? It's my grandpa's favorite." Eliza looked at the paper, a simple lead sheet for Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She smiled at the child. "What's your name?" "Lily," the girl replied. "And where's your grandpa, Lily?" The girl pointed to an elderly man in a wheelchair near the front. He raised a weathered hand in greeting. "This one's for Lily's grandpa," Eliza announced. The first words she had spoken to the audience all evening. She began with a delicate introduction, then eased into the familiar melody, adding her own improvisations while keeping the beloved tune recognizable. Looking over at the old man, she saw him close his eyes, a peaceful smile spreading across his face as his granddaughter held his hand. For her final piece, Eliza chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a technically demanding composition that had been one of her showcase pieces at Juilliard. As the powerful chords and rapid passages filled the room, she lost herself completely in the music, her whole body engaged in the performance, swaying with the rhythm, leaning into the emotional crescendos. The final chord hung in the air for a breathless moment before the restaurant erupted in thunderous applause. Several people rose to their feet, the standing ovation spreading until nearly everyone was standing. Antonio hurried over with the microphone, his face flushed with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, Eliza Reynolds. She will be playing for us every Friday and Saturday night from now on." More applause followed as Eliza stood and gave a small bow, her cheeks flushed with exertion and emotion. As the regular background music resumed and she made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and compliments, she felt a curious lightness in her chest, as if something long compressed had finally been released. When she reached the back of the restaurant, Thomas was waiting, a glass of champagne in each hand. He offered one to her. That, he said simply, was world class. Eliza accepted the glass with a tired smile. "Thank you. I mean it," Thomas insisted. "I've attended performances at Lincoln Center that weren't half as moving." He gestured to a chair. "May I have a moment?" Eliza nodded, grateful to sit down. Her legs felt wobbly, and the adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was beginning to ebb. "I'm flying back to New York tomorrow," Thomas said. "But before I go, I wanted to tell you that I've been doing some thinking." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You were right the other night, about me trying to rescue you from a life you didn't ask to be rescued from. It was presumptuous, but," Eliza prompted, sensing there was more. "But I still believe you have a gift that deserves a bigger stage." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is not charity or a rescue attempt. Consider it an investment in extraordinary talent." Eliza hesitated before taking the envelope. Inside was a brochure for a summer music program at Eastman School of Music, along with a letter confirming that a full scholarship had been arranged for her. "It's 3 weeks in July," Thomas explained. "All expenses paid. Your siblings would be on summer break then, right? They'd be okay without you for a few weeks?" Eliza stared at the brochure, conflicting emotions washing over her face. "How did you arrange this so quickly?" "I made some calls. Sent a few emails describing what I'd heard. The director of the program is an old friend. He trusts my judgment and agreed to hold a spot pending an audition." Thomas leaned forward. "But after tonight, I'm certain you'll get in. This could be a first step back into that world on your own terms at your own pace." "I don't know what to say," Eliza murmured. "Say you'll think about it." "That's all?" Thomas smiled slightly. "The audition can be done by video submission. No pressure, no obligations, just an open door, as I promised." Before Eliza could respond, Antonio appeared at their table, beaming with pride and excitement. "Eliza, you were magnificent." He clasped her shoulder warmly. The phone has been ringing non-stop since you finished. People making reservations for next weekend asking specifically if you'll be playing. Thomas stood up. I should let you celebrate with your boss. I just wanted to congratulate you before I left. He extended his hand. Thank you for a meme. As they shook hands, Eliza said, I'll think about the program, Mr. Walsh, and thank you, not for the opportunity, but for listening when I spoke. Not many people in your position would have. After Thomas departed, the rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and excitement. The kitchen staff had prepared a special meal for her. Fellow servers who had initially seemed skeptical now looked at her with newfound respect. Customers stopped by her table to express their appreciation. Later that night, as she rode the bus home clutching the envelope from Thomas and a substantial amount of tips, Eliza gazed out the window at the passing city lights. Music was playing in her mind. Not Debussy or Rachmaninoff, but something new, something she hadn't heard before. Her fingers tapped lightly against her knee, working out a melody that seemed to speak of loss and rediscovery, of paths diverged and perhaps, just perhaps, converging once more. When she reached her stop, she pulled out her phone and called her sister. Hey, she said when her sister answered sleepily. Sorry to wake you, but I've got something important to tell you about. Something's changed. Walking the short distance to their modest apartment, Eliza felt different somehow, as if the person who had left that morning was not quite the same one returning now. The weight of responsibility for her siblings remained, her practical concerns unchanged, but something had shifted inside her. A door long closed had cracked open, letting in a shaft of light from a world she thought she had left behind forever. 3 months had passed since Eliza's first performance at Antonio's, and life had taken on a new rhythm. Her weekend performances had become a local attraction, drawing crowds that consistently filled the restaurant to capacity. Antonio had invested in professional recording equipment and created a YouTube channel featuring highlights of her performances, which had gained a modest but growing following. Spring had fully blossomed into summer, bringing with it not just warmer weather but new possibilities. Eliza had submitted her audition video to the Eastman Summer Program and received an enthusiastic acceptance within days. Now, with just 1 week left before her departure, she sat in their small apartment living room surrounded by piles of laundry and a half-packed suitcase. Her brother and sister sprawled across the sofa opposite her. I still can't believe you're actually going, her sister Penny said, folding one of Eliza's blouses and adding it to the suitcase. At 17, she had their mother's delicate features and determined chin. 3 whole weeks. Having second thoughts? Asked David, her 19-year-old brother, looking up from his summer reading assignment. His baseball scholarship at State University had covered tuition, but summer classes were his responsibility, so he was living at home to save money. About 1 million of them, Eliza admitted with a nervous laugh. Maybe this is crazy. I haven't been away from you two for more than a day since Mom died. Penny finished softly. Which was 4 years ago, Eliza. We're not kids anymore. David nodded emphatically. Penny can drive now. I can cook without burning down the kitchen. And we both know how to operate the washing machine. Besides, Penny added, Mrs. Chen next door promised to check on us every day, and she has your number. The program coordinator's number, and probably the number for the Rochester Police Department just in case. Eliza smiled, though her stomach still knotted with anxiety. The thought of leaving her siblings, even temporarily, went against every protective instinct she'd developed over the past 4 years. What if the scholarship is a mistake? She asked, voicing one of her deepest fears. What if I'm not good enough anymore? These people will be serious musicians, current students, teachers, and David snorted. Have you seen the comments on your YouTube videos? People are asking when your album drops. That's different. That's just me playing pop songs and easy classics for people eating pasta. Penny stopped folding and fixed her sister with a serious look. I came to the restaurant last Saturday. You didn't see me. I sat in the back corner with my friend. You played that piece, the Russian one with all the crazy fast parts. Rachmaninoff, Eliza supplied. Whatever it was called, the entire place went completely silent. Not a fork moving, not a whisper, nothing. Just you and that piano having what looked like some kind of intense conversation that everyone was privileged to witness. Penny leaned forward. That's not easy classics for people eating pasta. That's art, Eliza. Before Eliza could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced down to see a message from Antonio. Staff meeting tomorrow morning. Important news. 9 a.m. Everything okay? David asked, noticing her frown. I'm not sure, Eliza replied. Antonio wants a staff meeting tomorrow morning. He never calls meetings. Maybe he's going to throw you a going-away party, Penny suggested brightly. Maybe, Eliza said, though something in Antonio's terse message gave her a sense of unease. The next morning, Eliza arrived at the restaurant to find the entire staff already gathered. The servers, kitchen staff, bartenders, and hostesses all sitting around pushed-together tables in the main dining area. Antonio stood at the head, looking unusually somber. Rose sat beside him, her normally cheerful face drawn with worry. Thank you all for coming, Antonio began once Eliza had taken her seat. I wanted to tell you this in person before you heard it elsewhere. He took a deep breath. I've received an offer to sell the restaurant. Murmurs of surprise and concern rippled through the group. As you know, business has been challenging for the past few years. The pandemic hit us hard, and while we recovered somewhat, the rising costs of ingredients, rent, and utilities have made it difficult to stay profitable. Antonio's eyes moved around the room, meeting each person's gaze briefly. The offer is substantial, more than I ever expected to get for this place. So you're selling? One of the cooks asked bluntly. Antonio held up his hands. I haven't decided yet. The potential buyer is a restaurant group that owns several upscale chains. They're interested in the location, not necessarily the concept. If the sale goes through, they would likely close us for several months for renovations, then reopen as one of their steakhouse concepts. The implications hung heavy in the air. A new concept meant new staff, new management. Everyone in the room would be out of a job. When would this happen? Rose asked, her voice tight. If I accept, they want to close the deal by the end of August. Antonio looked genuinely pained. I wanted you all to know now so you'd have time to prepare just in case. I've asked them for assurances that my staff would be considered for positions in the new restaurant, but they can't make any guarantees. Eliza felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Antonio's was more than just her workplace. It had become a second home, the place where her music had been reborn. What about the piano? She asked quietly. Antonio met her eyes, his expression softening. The piano would not be part of the new concept. He paused. Actually, Eliza, I'd like to speak with you privately after this meeting. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of questions, concerns, and reassurances. Antonio promised to keep everyone informed as negotiations progressed and to provide references and assistance to anyone who wanted to look for other opportunities. When the meeting concluded, the staff dispersed in subdued groups. Conversation hushed and worried. Eliza remained seated as Antonio pulled up a chair across from her. I'm sorry about the timing, he said, just when your performances were becoming a real draw. It's your business, Eliza replied. You have to do what's best for you. Antonio nodded, looking tired. For 27 years, this place has been my life. My father started it, I grew up here. Took over when he got too old to manage it. But times change. The neighborhood is changing. These big companies move in, property values go up, rents increase. He sighed. The offer they made would allow me to retire comfortably, maybe move back to Italy like I always talked about. Eliza tried to smile. That sounds nice. About the piano, Antonio continued. If I do sell, I want you to have it. Eliza's eyes widened. Antonio, I couldn't. My father would want it to go to someone who would play it, who would keep it alive with music. Not stuck in my retirement apartment or sold to strangers. He reached across the table and patted her hand. Consider it payment for bringing music back to this old place, even if just for a little while. Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. Thank you, she managed. That's incredibly generous. There is one condition, Antonio added, a hint of his usual spark returning to his eyes. You must promise to keep playing wherever you end up. No more 2-year silences. Eliza nodded, too moved to speak. Later that afternoon, Eliza sat alone at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. The restaurant was quiet, not yet open for dinner service. The news of the potential sale had cast a shadow over her upcoming trip. Would Antonio still be here when she returned? Would these weekend performances that had come to mean so much to her continue? Or was this chapter already closing? So absorbed was she in these thoughts that she didn't notice the restaurant door open or hear footsteps approaching until a voice spoke. "Penny for your thoughts?" Eliza looked up, startled to see Thomas Walsh standing there. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, in jeans and a light blue button-down shirt rather than his usual suit. "Mr. Walsh," she said in surprise. "I didn't expect to see you again. I'm in town for a few days finalizing some business." He gestured to the piano bench. "May I?" Eliza nodded, sliding over to make room. Thomas sat beside her, looking at the piano with appreciation. "Been practicing for Eastman?" he asked. "Every spare moment," Eliza confirmed. "But now I'm not sure if I should even go." "Why not?" Thomas looked genuinely concerned. Eliza explained about the staff meeting, the potential sale, and what it might mean for everyone at Antonio's. "So the restaurant might be sold while I'm gone, and everyone here could lose their jobs, including me. Doesn't seem like the right time to be pursuing a summer music program 3 states away." Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering. "You know," he finally said, "when I first met you, I made the mistake of thinking I knew what was best for your life after hearing you play for 5 minutes. I'm not going to make that mistake again." He turned slightly to face her. "But I will ask this, what does your heart tell you to do?" Eliza smiled ruefully. "My heart and my head rarely agree these days." "Then let me ask something else. Your siblings, what do they think you should do?" "They think I should go," Eliza admitted. "They've been so supportive, practically pushing me out the door." Thomas nodded. "And Antonio? Did he suggest you cancel your plans because of the potential sale?" "No," Eliza said. "Actually, he offered me the piano if he sells. Said his only condition was that I promise to keep playing." "Smart man." Thomas looked thoughtful. "You know, the development project that brought me to town 3 months ago, it's not what I originally envisioned." Eliza raised an eyebrow, curious about the sudden change in subject. After hearing you play, I went back to my hotel and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about this neighborhood, about places like Antonio's." Thomas gestured around the restaurant. "So I revised my proposal. Instead of luxury condos and high-end chain stores, we're renovating the existing buildings, creating affordable housing along with commercial spaces specifically designed for local businesses." "Really?" Eliza was genuinely surprised. "That doesn't sound as profitable." "It's not," Thomas acknowledged with a small smile. "But sometimes there are more important considerations than maximizing profit margins." He stood up. "The point is, things change, Eliza. Plans change. People change. But that doesn't mean you should put your own growth on hold." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, a different one than he'd given her before. "My new office is actually just a few blocks from here now. I've decided to oversee this project personally, which means I'll be in town regularly over the next year." Eliza took the card, noting the local address. "Go to Eastman," Thomas said gently. "See where it leads. And know that whatever happens with Antonio's, whatever decisions you make afterward, there are people in your corner, not trying to rescue you, just supporting you as you find your own way." As Thomas turned to leave, Eliza called after him. "Mr. Walsh?" He paused. "Thank you. Not just for the scholarship, but for—" She gestured vaguely, struggling to articulate her thoughts. "For seeing you." Thomas finished simply. "You're welcome. Now go practice. I hear Eastman has pretty high standards." After he left, Eliza remained at the piano, her fingers finally pressing down on the keys, drawing forth a gentle melody. As she played, she felt a curious sense of peace settling over her. Whatever came next, whether Antonio's remained or changed, whether her musical journey led back to school or down some as yet undiscovered path, she was no longer just waiting tables and waiting for life to happen. She was playing her own song now. The concert hall at Eastman. School of Music buzzed with anticipation. It was the final showcase of the summer program and every seat was filled. Parents, faculty, music industry professionals, and local music lovers had all gathered to hear the culminating performances from the program's participants. Backstage, Eliza paced nervously, her simple black concert dress a stark contrast to the elaborate gowns some of the other female performers had chosen. 3 intense weeks of master classes, private instruction, ensemble work, and theory had flown by in a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had been challenged, pushed, critiqued, and occasionally praised by some of the finest musical minds in the country. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. Poking his head into the green room, Eliza nodded, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. She checked her phone one last time before tucking it away. There were good luck messages from Penny and David, a photo of them with Mrs. Chen holding a homemade Go Eliza sign. Another text from Rose included a picture of the staff at Antonio's gathered around the piano, all giving thumbs up. Antonio himself had sent a simple message. "Make the piano sing, little one." The one message she had hoped for but hadn't received was from Thomas. She hadn't seen or heard from him since their conversation at Antonio's before she left for Rochester. It shouldn't have surprised her. He was a busy man with his own life and concerns. But she had hoped he might check in on her progress. "Eliza Reynolds, you're up next," the stage manager called, breaking into her thoughts. She followed him through the maze of backstage corridors to the wings. On stage, a violinist was finishing his piece, the final notes soaring through the hall before being met with enthusiastic applause. As he took his bows and exited on the opposite side, Eliza saw Dr. Abernathy, the program director, approach the microphone. "Our next performer joined us under rather unusual circumstances," the distinguished older woman began. "Unlike many of our participants who come from conservatories or university music programs, she came to us from a small Italian restaurant where she had been working as a waitress." A murmur of interest rippled through the audience. However, Dr. Abernathy continued with a smile. "As you're about to hear, talent sometimes takes unexpected paths. Please welcome Eliza Reynolds performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 2 in B-flat minor." Eliza walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She made her way to the magnificent Steinway Concert Grand at center stage, a far cry from Antonio's restored upright. As her eyes adjusted to the lights, she scanned the audience out of habit, not expecting to see any familiar faces. Then she froze. In the third row, looking somewhat out of place among the formally dressed audience members but beaming with pride, sat Antonio. Beside him was Rose, and next to them, her heart skipped, Thomas Walsh watching her intently. They had come, all the way to Rochester, for her. Drawing strength from their presence, Eliza seated herself at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The hall fell silent, hundreds of people waiting for her to begin one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. For a brief, terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The powerful opening chords resonated throughout the hall, giving way to the cascading passages that followed. As her fingers flew across the keys, Eliza felt herself disappearing into the music, becoming merely a conduit for something larger than herself. All the emotion of the past months, the rediscovery of her passion, the uncertainty about the future, the gratitude toward those who had supported her, flowed through her playing. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the audience erupted in applause. Eliza rose, slightly dazed, and bowed deeply. As she straightened, she met Thomas's eyes. He was on his feet, applauding vigorously, genuine joy written across his face. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. After the showcase concluded, Eliza found herself surrounded by her unexpected visitors in the reception area. "Surprise!" Rose exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "You were magnificent, sweetheart." Antonio was next, embracing her with fatherly pride. "My father would have wept to hear you play like that," he said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Thomas hung back slightly, allowing the others their moment. When Eliza finally turned to him, he simply offered his hand. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You exceeded even my highest expectations." "Thank you for coming," Eliza replied, genuinely moved. "All of you. I can't believe you made the trip." "Wouldn't have missed it," Thomas assured her. "Besides, we have news that couldn't wait until you got home." Before he could continue, Dr. Abernathy approached their small group. "Eliza, I was hoping to speak with you before you left." "And these must be your family?" "My friends," Eliza corrected, then made quick introductions. "Mr. Walsh and I have already spoken," Dr. Abernathy said with a smile. "In fact, he's been quite persistent in keeping tabs on your progress these past weeks." Eliza glanced at Thomas, surprised. "I wanted to formally extend an invitation," Dr. Abernathy continued. We would like to offer you a place in our undergraduate program with a full scholarship. Your talent is extraordinary and we believe Eastman is where you belong. Eliza's jaw dropped. But the application deadline? My audition? Consider the past 3 weeks your extended audition, Dr. Abernathy said with a chuckle. And you passed with flying colors. The faculty vote was unanimous. As the implications sank in, Eliza felt both elated and torn. A full scholarship to Eastman was beyond her wildest dreams. But it would mean moving to Rochester, leaving her siblings, leaving Antonio's. This is where the other news comes in, Thomas said gently, reading her expression. Antonio, would you like to explain? The restaurant owner nodded. I've decided not to sell to the restaurant group. Instead, I'm partnering with a local chef who wants to preserve Antonio's character while updating the menu and expanding our music offerings. And, Rose added excitedly, we're going to feature live music every night, not just weekends. A regular rotation of local musicians with special events when you're home on breaks. Eliza looked between them, trying to process everything. But what about the money? You said the offer would let you retire comfortably. Antonio shrugged. Some things are more important than money. Besides, this new partnership will still provide financial security, just over a longer period. As for your brother and sister, Thomas added, I've spoken with them about options. David's university has a Rochester campus where he could transfer if he wanted to be closer to you, and Penny will be applying to colleges soon herself. You've been busy, Eliza said, still overwhelmed. We all have, Thomas acknowledged. The point is, you don't have to choose between your music and your responsibilities. With the right support system, you can have both. Later that night, after her visitors had gone to their hotel, and she'd returned to her dormitory to pack for tomorrow's departure, Eliza sat on the edge of her bed, still trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone chimed with a text from Penny. Did they tell you the news? Say yes to Eastman, Eliza laughed, typing back. How long have you known about this? The reply came quickly. Weeks? Thomas called us right after you left for Rochester. He's been helping David look at transfer options. I already looked at high schools in Rochester too, in case we all move. Another text followed. Mom would be so proud of you right now. Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. Her mother had been her first piano teacher, the one who had recognized her talent and scraped together money for lessons even when times were tight. What would she think of all this? The next morning, before leaving for the airport with Antonio, Rose, and Thomas, Eliza made one last visit to the practice room she'd used throughout the program. The small space with its upright piano had become a sanctuary over the past 3 weeks. She sat at the piano, not to play but to think. 4 months ago, she had been a waitress with abandoned dreams, convinced that her path had been permanently altered by circumstance. Now, possibilities stretched before her that she hadn't dared imagine. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Thomas. The others are waiting in the car, he said. Just wanted to make sure you hadn't changed your mind and decided to barricade yourself in here. Eliza smiled. I was just saying goodbye to this room. I've spent more hours here than in my dorm. Thomas nodded, understanding. You know, the first time I heard you play, I thought I was witnessing raw talent in need of saving. I realize now how arrogant that was. He leaned against the doorframe. You never needed saving. You just needed the right doors to open at the right time. And the right people to believe in me, Eliza added softly. So, Eastman in the fall? Eliza nodded, a sense of certainty settling over her. Eastman in the fall. Good. I've already spoken with a real estate agent about suitable apartments for you and potentially your siblings. At Eliza's raised eyebrow, Thomas chuckled. Sorry, old habits. I'll back off and let you handle the details. Actually, Eliza said, standing up and gathering her bag, I wouldn't mind some advice on apartments. As long as it's just advice, not you signing a lease on my behalf. Deal. As they walked toward the exit, Thomas asked, Have you thought about what you'll play for your first official recital as an Eastman student? Eliza considered for a moment. I'm working on an original composition, actually. Something that tells the story of the past few months, from silence to rediscovery. I look forward to hearing it, Thomas said sincerely. Outside, the summer sun bathed the campus in golden light. Antonio and Rose waited by the car, arguing good-naturedly about whether they should stop for breakfast before the airport. Looking at them, her unlikely champions, and thinking of her siblings back home, Eliza felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her path had been winding and unexpected, marked by both loss and discovery. But somehow all of it had led her here, to this moment of new beginnings. As they drove away from Eastman, Eliza watched the building recede in the rear window. She would be back soon enough, not as a visitor or summer student, but as someone truly belonging to this world of music again. Her phone buzzed with another text from Penny. "David says to tell you he's already researching Rochester apartments with good soundproofing, so he can study while you practice." Eliza laughed, showing the message to the others in the car. As they all joined in her laughter, she realized that the music inside her, once muted by circumstance and necessity, now had all the room it needed to grow, to breathe, to soar. The waitress who had reluctantly played piano for a demanding customer had found her way back to herself, one note at a time.